The Manipulator from Polyverse is some super fun creative pitch modulation plugin that I recently got and feel very excited about, which is why in this video I just want to speak a little about it and give you some good idea of why this works so particularly well for what I'm trying to do, and also why I actually got it compared to some other plugins for pitch modulation that might be around. Also, for transparency, be known that I got this plugin for free from Polyverse, but it was me reaching out to them because I knew it already and was kind of certain that I like it and I'm kind of convinced of the qualities. So it's not some video of I just got some plugin and now try to say something positive about it. I'm actually very convinced of it, and otherwise I would never have reached out to them anyways. So also at this part, thanks to Polyverse for actually being up for such a deal. And if you're new here, let me also quickly say hi. So my name is Yannis, and on my channel you can find many videos about making and creating music, and most importantly having more fun doing so. So in case you'll enjoy this video, you're already warmly invited to also browse around on my channel and watch some other videos later. Before knowing about the Manipulator, I was basically busy setting up some mobile electric drum performance rack because I'm using the Nord drum, and you can find many videos on my channel about some performances. I'll also link some playlist. But it wasn't really free because I always had to plan them a lot in advance, and I didn't have this one setting that I could always rely on. It was a lot of experimentation, and in those past months I also started meeting some people for having some little sessions and trying out this setting in like real life, and also trying to find ways of being more spontaneous. Because I'm originally a jazz drummer, and there you just always kind of immediately use all your ideas and feel very spontaneous. And I want to reach the same kind of thing with my electronic drum pad, and I know it's kind of difficult, but not impossible. And so I wanted to have some more solid system to rely on for whatever kind of song or music I play. And for such a system you also need some tools that can keep the music interesting, because if you're just recording loops and using sequences, they can become incredibly static after a while. So I was just looking for some creative effects that I can use in order to change textures of things I recorded already, and that just give me lots of creative possibilities. So during those sessions of experimenting and trying out stuff, it became clear to me that pitch modulation is something I really want to do, because it's perfect for adding like excitement, turning something you recorded already into some new texture, and also just reusing your material and keeping it interesting. But the problem was with all plugins that I already had that they have some latency issues, and namely I used the Ableton shifter, and you can hear some latency once you apply the pitch modulation. It also doesn't have that many sound possibilities, or more like modulation possibilities. And also there's another plugin from Soundtoys called Little Alter Boy. I love it, it sounds super amazing, but unfortunately it's just impossible to use this live because it applies so much latency to your whole session even. So even if it's sitting on some unused track that is muted or not even in use, it still messes with your whole session. And yeah, it's very sad, but this way also totally unusable. And so I was just searching for plugins that, like pitch modulation plugins that don't have latency issues, and that's how I found out about the Manipulator. So in short, latency was my top priority, because I also saw that it can do amazing things apart from just not having latency issues. But before, I just needed to make sure that there's no latency at all. So this plugin can do absolutely a ton of things, but the great thing is that you can start small. You don't have to use everything at once. And in the beginning, for me, as I mentioned, latency was important, and all I wanted basically was some pitch knob and some formant knob. And if you only want to use those, the thing is probably way too overqualified, but you can just start simple, and I was really happy to just have some buttons for this. You can also mess with harmonics and FM modulation. And also you get some tool called Alternator, which basically messes with your beat and can kind of rearrange it almost rhythmically. Just see what it does. here really have no idea how to explain this to you. My favorite function is maybe the smear function, because if you play drums, you can perfectly add those short moments of glitch or like some little white texture that just breaks the kind of percussive character. And also you got those options for like some stereo widening effect or some detune. Basic stuff, but also very handy to have. And then on the bottom you might have the most powerful engine of this whole thing, because that's the modulation engine. So you can use some meta knob, which is fun because you can apply basically everything you want to one knob. So it's like your one individual effect knob, or actually you can have up to 4. And it's always color coded. So you see this one is green and you want it to affect the pitch, for example. So you increase the amount of the green color at the pitch, maybe a little bit of the formant, but into the other way, and out of a sudden you have your individual modulation knob. And you also have like envelope followers, some envelope or some sequencer that you can also use as some LFO, or also you can apply some MIDI mappings to this one. So lots of possibilities for modulating the sound. And I feel like it's more a sound design tool because I haven't gotten so much into it yet. I'm more in this kind of how to use it for my live set kind of situation. But if you just get into sequencers and get a hang of how they affect those different timbres, you can probably make some incredibly unique sounds with it. And also if you're using some rhythmical sequencers, I think you have all sorts of possibilities. And that's something great about this plugin, because you can use it in a very simple way, but also you can really dive deep in terms of modulations. And one thing I kind of left out because it's not so relevant for me, but it's more relevant for singers, and I think it's also often used as a vocal effect processor, that here you can receive MIDI. You would have to set up in Ableton some additional MIDI channel and send the MIDI to then the channel with the manipulator. And then you can actually play some chords, for example, on your keyboard and just have this kind of polyphony for like some mono sound. So you can turn one voice into multiple voices. And for drums, I didn't really find this so useful yet. Didn't sound so great to me. I think for voices or like some pitched sounds, it's perfect. But yeah, that's why I don't really speak about this here. I also want to give you some practical example of how I use it so far. I mean, it's a bit Ableton specific, but even if you're not using Ableton, you might still get some good vibe of what you can do with it. Because in Ableton, you can create those things called audio effect rack. And while it's super easy to map MIDI to the manipulator, I always prefer to use it inside Ableton with some macros in the audio effect rack. So here you see like manipulator mix, that's the mix amount, and here's the smear or the FM ratio, pitch, formant. Those are all mapped to the manipulator, because for the way I work, it's a bit easier to control it this way. And so I have this MIDI controller. You don't see it right now, but it's next to me, so I can kind of manipulate those parameters. And so first of all, that's some very fun way of just doing it with knobs. But then it has a random function, and it's kind of similar to just browsing through presets, because if you're using, I'm usually not a preset person, but with a manipulator, I feel like it's like some random button, because also it sounds all the time different depending on what kind of sound source you use. So some drum beat will sound way different through some preset than, for example, some synth line. So there's a good reason for using presets as a kind of random function. And here in Ableton, you can also just use a random button for the audio effect rack. So that means if you have this simple drum beat, you can just sometimes you press the random button and just see what it comes up with. So if you're this type of control freak, I don't know if it's the perfect plugin for you, because I feel like you need to be open a little for getting surprised. I mean, there's always a logic to how the sounds are created, but to me this is more like some experimentation tool where sometimes I just accept that I have no clue what's happening. And I mean, you saw me browsing through random presets now, and actually not presets, this is like Ableton Random, but you saw how many different textures I just got from randomizations. And for playing live, I feel like especially if you don't have immediately some musician with you, you need your instruments to give you the kind of creative input. So you need your instruments to surprise you a little. And in this case, that's just the perfect tool for me, because I don't try to understand it perfectly like I would try with my synthesizer, for example. I just accept that I have no clue what's coming out of this, but I have some basic trust that it's going to be something cool. But of course, the more you use it, the more you'll get some experience on how certain parameters affect the sound and what happens if you change this. But it's just totally up to you. You can completely ignore all the kind of functions and just use the presets and just have some fun, I think. It would work really well. Or you can also just by time get some better understanding and also sometimes create sounds you control a little more. But overall, I'd say it's best for just getting surprised and getting this kind of creative input. And I hope this could give you some little idea of how the manipulator works. I mean, I know it wasn't a full deep dive tutorial, but at the same time, I'm not able to do this yet because I'm learning the plugin, and at the same time, maybe this is a plugin I don't want to do a deep dive because I just enjoy this kind of craziness it creates on demand if I just push buttons, which is something I think that is very helpful and I appreciate a lot. In case you decide to buy the manipulator, there's going to be some little affiliate link down below in the description, also as a pinned comment. So once you're at the buying stage and you're like, actually there was this guy Yannis and he made some video that was actually kind of helpful, that's a very sweet way of supporting this channel and saying thank you without any additional cost for you. For some more creative input on making and creating music, I'm going to link you 2 videos here, so you're warmly invited to watch them right now. And apart from that, I wish you inspiration with whatever it is that you create and really hope to see you soon again at this channel. Bye!